Welcome to Safe and Sound, sponsored by White Mountain Fire and Life Safety. Today on the show, we have Trent Clatterbuck, Senior Investigator for the Navajo County Medical Examiner's Office. Welcome to the show, Trent.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. What is it that you do for the county? Let's just start there.
I am the Senior Investigator for the Medical Examiner's Office, so my job is to go out and investigate deaths. And then I oversee another investigator who's stationed in Holbrook, and then basically any death that's reported to the Medical Examiner's Office, we either go out on, do a field investigation, report that information back to Dr. Karchner, the alternate medical examiner for Navajo County, because we don't have a forensic science center. We're not as large as Pima, Maricopa, or Coconino. So we'll run the case by Dr. Karchner. He'll make a determination if it's in the best interest to send it for an autopsy, or if it's pretty clear cut that he can do an external and sign the death certificate.
Now, what got you into this? Where'd you start?
In Maricopa County. Okay. I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps and was interested in forensics. Started going to college, took a course called Understanding Death and Dying, a humanities credit. And an investigator came out who was the chief of Maricopa County's medical examiner's office. And I just asked for a business card, said I'd send him a resume, and if he had anything, let me know. And called me back a week later and said, hey, I'm doing an internship. You don't really have a lot of experience, so I'd like to bring you on, see how you work. I hire from the inside. And within 2 weeks, I was hired as a full-time transporter. And then within 6 months, I was hired as an investigator.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then how'd you get from there, Maricopa County, to Navajo?
I ended up moving to Washington, D.C., got out of forensics and got into law enforcement. Stayed there for almost 5 years, and then I transferred to a sheriff's department on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And then I stayed there for another 5.5 years, 6 years. And moved back to Arizona to be closer to my family, and was in the right place at the right time. I didn't want to keep pursuing law enforcement. But a position with the medical examiner's office was open, so I applied, and I meet their qualifications by miles and miles and miles.
I'm sure you do. How long have you been with Navajo County now?
It'll be 4 years in August.
Okay. Yeah, and I work for Navajo County too. I enjoy it. It's nice, and
yeah.
The people there are great. It just started with public health, so I just ended up meeting you, and I wasn't familiar with that part of it as much as I am now after speaking with you. But when it comes to death, what cases are you involved in? When are you not involved? I mean, are you involved in every one? Is there certain stipulations? In
some cases, I get called on all of them. Does that mean our office is actually going to get actively involved? No. Per Arizona revised statutes, there's a list of deaths that meet the jurisdictional guidelines. Death of a prisoner, death of somebody at their place of employment, if we can prove that there was even a remote possibility that their work led to their demise. If somebody is at work and has like a heart attack and they have a history, then there's a good possibility we're going to decline that case and refer them back to their primary care physician. But anything non-natural, motor vehicle accidents, homicides, suicides, anything that you can determine that it's not due to natural causes. So, you know, we live up in the woods, things happen. Lightning strikes, that's definitely going to be something we're going to look at. Drownings, somebody falls off a cliff. I mean, anything trauma related, period, is definitely going to come to the medical examiner's office.
And why does it, what are you looking for when that happens, though? Why does something like that come to the medical examiners? What do they want you to be looking for?
Because it's non-natural. We got to be able to determine cause, what caused the death, and the manner of death. Is it a homicide? Is it a suicide? Is it natural, or is it undeterminable? The medical examiner, whoever that may be for whatever county in the state of Arizona, is the only one that can sign a death certificate with anything other than non-natural means or causes. So, like a motor vehicle accident, somebody suffers severe trauma, they die, they get to the hospital, and then they're pronounced. I mean, we kind of know what happened to them, and a lot of people seem to think, oh, we'll just call the doctor and they'll sign off on it. Well, that death certificate has to be approved, and if it's a trauma-related death, then it can only be signed by a medical examiner, because then you've got civil litigation and different things, criminal, cases come out of motor vehicle accidents, drunk drivers, and things of that nature. So we are an independent agency that oversees what's going on with how you're going to determine cause and manner of death on that individual. So we're for the public, but we're not against them. We're for the police, but we're not against them. We work in conjunction with their investigations to make sure that everything is legitimate, and that if there is a situation where somebody thinks that there's some sort of foul play involved, well, the police are going to look into it, and if they can prove that there is foul play, all of it's got to match, because once that body is taken for autopsy, whether we go down to Tucson or we go to Coconino County, the medical examiner there, who is a forensic certified pathologist, is going to make it say yes or no. The story just doesn't jive based on these injuries, or, this isn't really right how you're saying this happened, because I just, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're experts in their fields, and they know forensics, and they know how to look at trauma and injuries and put it all together. And then therefore, as an independent agency, we're not benefiting one individual. We're here for pretty much the total population, to make sure that if something is fishy, it gets looked at appropriately. If something's pretty clear cut, then it'll get looked at, the way it needs to get looked at.
Now, for these accidents and crashes, and do you go on scene and look at the person who's
Yes.
deceased? Is that usually where you do your work, is on scene?
Yes. Now, from start to finish, any death that happens in our county should automatically be reported to the nearest law enforcement agency. So if it happens at the hospital, they may call me first, and then I'll tell them, yeah, it sounds like a medical examiner's case, you need to get law enforcement involved. Because in order for us to move forward, we have to have an agency investigating the circumstances surrounding what led to this person's death. And then that's what the police do. And then we come out, and then we look at the decedent, no matter what the scenario is, and we take our photographs, we do our field investigation, we'll talk to family members, we'll talk to friends, we'll talk to their primary care physicians, we'll request records, we'll do whatever is necessary to make a determination, whether it be natural, homicide, suicide, whatever it may be. In some cases where it becomes like undeterminable, you have skeletal remains that are found out in the field. Did they walk there themselves and just have a medical emergency and fall victim to whatever natural disease process? And then with time, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, their body goes back to the earth, and then you find these skeletal remains. We still have to try to find, is there any trauma to them that's not animal activity? Is there any trauma, like say a hatchet, a knife wound, a gunshot wound, whatever it may be, to those bones? And then we have to try to put the skeleton back together and try to figure out their genealogy. Is it an African American? Is it a Caucasian? Is it a Native American? And then start rebuilding. And then we start looking through databases of missing persons, trying to figure out, has anybody reported anybody missing in this area? And then we got to piece it together. I mean, we have forensic odontologists, entomologists. They all come into play and try to figure out who this individual is, get them identified so that we can notify their family. Now, in a case like that, where you have skeletal remains and you have no internal organs, you have no outward skin, that may be an undeterminable death, because there's no way to tell, because there's nothing there that's viable for the doctor to examine other than the bones. And then with forensic anthropologists, if we have to, we'll contract out of county, most of the time down in Pima with Dr., I think it's Johnston. He's a forensic anthropologist. He'll look at the bones, and then he'll make a determination. Is it male? Is it female? Who is it? Where is it? And,
Wow.
what can we say? And try to piece it all back together, and at some point make notification to the family.
Give them some relief or
Yeah.
some closure in a way. Have you been involved in things that have led to that?
Not since I've been here in Navajo County.
But
Pretty
I'm
much
sure.
all skeletal remains that we have found have had one thing or another that's an identifying feature. If you're fully clothed, your clothing will protect your skin. It will protect it for a long period of time, depending how tight, like socks. We had a lady that was found as skeletal remains up in the outskirts of Winslow. Well, she had a very distinctive tattoo on her ankle, and we actually found her foot still intact with the skin inside a boot under a sock. with a very identifiable tattoo. So we were able to say, okay, does she have dental records? We got to get dental records. We did a confirmation with a forensic odontologist, and he was able to say, yes, this is this woman.
Wow.
And it's happened a few times, never to a point where it's complete skeletal remains like you would see on television.
Yeah.
I mean, it could happen.
I can see how you like what you do. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting. A lot of people ask me, how do you do it? And it is very non-stressful. I mean, it is time sensitive, and it does get, a little overwhelming at times, but it's attention to detail oriented, and you want to be able to put the pieces together and be intrigued as to what you're doing to find answers. Anytime I talk to family members, I tell them, I say, we may not know now, but I will have more answers for you in the future. I mean, things can take time. I mean, there are cases where we have to draw toxicology samples and send them to a lab. We don't know why that individual died. We have good ideas, but we don't know. It's either natural, it's either mixed drug related, something. But until our tox results come back, we don't know. So then we just kind of sit and wait. After we've talked to the family and explained to them, it may take 6 to 8 weeks. It's a long time, but you don't have to wait. We'll get everything we need today, tomorrow, and then we will release your loved one to the funeral home of your choice. And then you're free to do a cremation, do a burial, whatever it is you want to do. But we're just not going to have the exact cause yet. And once you explain that to families, I think they get an understanding that they're only looking out for the best interest of the general population. We want to know. And in some cases where, say you have an elderly individual and they've got enough history, they've got heart disease, they've got breathing issues like COPD or things of that nature, but the family wants an autopsy. It's not viable for the county financially to do an autopsy on everybody. So when you have a case that, meets the jurisdictional guidelines, we have to send those ones. But on those cases, I'll explain to the family why. I mean, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody specifically, but if you're over the age of 65 and you're obese and you have hypertension and you have a slew of other problems and you pass away and you're not under the care of a physician, the chances of us sending you for autopsy are slim to none. I mean, it's just not feasible. I mean, if there is a possibility of a public health hazard or there's some sort of criminal situation, then yes. But if it's something that, person went to sleep last night, wife woke up this morning, husband's not responsive, calls 911, there's no signs of foul play, no signs of trauma, we will get involved, but ultimately we'll request records from whatever doctor you saw in the past and get that kind of history. And then me, Dr. Karchner, and Scott Self will go out, do an external, do what we need to do to make sure that if we do see something that's an anomaly, then we make the right call and send them for an autopsy. But I do have a lot of conversations with family members where they want one for their own peace of mind, but it's very expensive. And
Sure.
And the county, like anywhere in the state of Arizona, we just can't afford to do an autopsy on everybody.
No, you have to have reasonable suspicion, I guess.
There's got to be more than, well, we just want one because we want to know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're over the age of 65 and you've never seen a physician and we don't have any concrete information of how you died, then yes, we're going to send you. But if we show up and there's beer cans everywhere and there's liquor bottles and there's signs of a GI bleed, we could pretty much tell what led to the demise of that individual.
You did it to yourself.
And there's some things that you don't need an autopsy to tell. Are we still going to draw blood and vitreous and possibly urine? Probably, because we just want to know. But I mean, there are telltale signs when you go to somebody's house, how they're living, how they're treating their body, and things of that nature. So
if somebody is just at home and they have a loved one die, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to contact the police, and the police is going to decide whether to bring you in or not?
9 out of 10 times, yes.
Okay.
If it's a home death, families should call 911, medics will get there, police will get there, and then they'll start asking questions. They'll start looking into their history and finding out what's going on. Every situation is different. Some people may die from the same exact cause, but their scenario or the situation that they were in is different. And the officers have to look into that, and they have to make a few phone calls, and they have to talk to family members. If they call me, which I'm 24/7. I'm available 365 days a year, 24/7. I'm never that busy, but I'm always available. And I mean, they can call me up and run the scenario by me. If it seems something that I'm not familiar with or just seems kind of awkward or weird, I'll call Dr. Karchner. If it's pretty clear cut, and I've done this for a long time in Maricopa County, I mean, there's so many cases that come in a year that it's hard not to have seen something at least once. So with my knowledge and experience and then my law enforcement background, they're really not going to surprise me when they call me and tell me certain things. And then I may ask them to dig a little deeper, find out a little bit more information, but we'll come to a conclusion within 30 minutes if we're going to respond or if it's something that can be sent to the funeral home of the family's choice.
And the body can't be moved from that position until you are notified if it's something that warrants you.
Again, 9 out of 10 times. Yeah. I have a very good working relationship with the local law enforcement and fire departments here. If they feel it's necessary to move the decedent to try to save a life, we have no problem with it. But if they show up and the person is already gone and you can clearly see that they are deceased and you could check for a pulse and there isn't one, there's really no need to move that decedent unless it's going to help move the case along. And they're going to definitely call me and say, hey, this is what we got, this is where we're at, we need to move him. And then I'm going to say, take plenty of photos the way he is, take photos when he's done, and then I'll be en route when you tell me you're ready. And then, so, I mean, that's just kind of the guidelines. And we get a lot of questions like, well, are we allowed to cover them? I mean, if it's 110 degrees outside and you're using a wool blanket, you're going to speed up the decomposition process. So use something light. If it's cold outside, it's not really going to change a lot, so you can cover them up with a wool blanket. But we just don't want to change the scene or speed up anything, because if that person does go for autopsy, the doctors are going to want to see them as close to how they were when they were found deceased to the day that they do the examination, and we don't want to change anything.
Now, I did want to bring up real quick is when family members fly in to the White Mountains and they're older and they come from California or other places and they end up dying up here, what should somebody do? I mean, they have somebody who's from a different state who has a different doctor, and they need to transport them back home. Do you get involved in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody that's an out-of-state resident will definitely come to the medical examiner's office, because if you're from, say, California or even West Virginia, your doctor that is not certified here in the state of Arizona cannot sign an Arizona death certificate. So, and we have a lot of visitors up here on the mountain. We have a lot of visitors north up by Kayenta, going through Death Valley and things like that. If an incident occurs where you're traveling or you have family members that are coming from out of state and something does happen to where they do pass away, they will become a medical examiner's case. If, again, law enforcement says, hey, this is what we've got, there's no trauma, there's no foul play, we may go ahead and send them to the nearest funeral home. We'll request records, and then we'll do what we call a medical record review and then sign the death certificate based on their past medical history from, say, their primary care physician out of state. And there's been several cases where I've actually called physicians out of state, told them kind of what's been going on, why they were notified, and explained to them why they can't sign the death certificate. And most of them are like, yeah, I didn't think I was going to be able to, but they called me, so I mean, it's my patient, and you know, I'll review their chart and sign it. And it's like, well, you can't. So being that you're out of state, will, you know, our justification for those medical records work, or do I need to go to the county attorney and get a subpoena? And then, you know, 9 out of 10 times with the HIPAA laws and everything else, they understand that there's a family member waiting to get this person back to wherever they came from. Most all doctors are going to release those records so that we can speed up the process and get that person, you know, to a funeral home here and then back to the funeral home where they're from.
So does every person get a death certificate from the county?
Yes.
Okay. So and what is the cost of those?
That's all through Vital Statistics.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure. All we do is if it's a medical examiner's case, we'll facilitate the death certificate in VSIMS, which is a state-ran system through Arizona State Vital Statistics. And we'll produce that death certificate. Dr. Karchner will sign it, and then it gets forwarded to the mortuary. The mortuary will then visit with the family, get additional information, complete that death certificate, and then submit it for approval. And they'll either get a burial permit or they'll get a cremation authorization, and then Vital Statistics will approve that death certificate, and then when it's available, they will make it available to the funeral home and the family. I'm not 100% sure what the costs are.
Okay.
So
But-
I always refer everybody back to their funeral home. The funeral home's going to know because they deal with that on a day-to-day basis.
And that's and that's a good way for them to get the information that,
Yes.
that they need through there, unless you end up being involved, and hopefully, I mean, no, that you're not involved.
Yeah, but even if we are involved, even if it's for the slightest amount of time, we're always available for phone calls. I had a county resident call me the other day asking questions about her and her husband because of their age and wanting to avoid any problems and just going straight to the funeral home. And basically I just explained to her, have a conversation with your doctor. If you're older and you're suffering from a life-threatening illness, have a conversation with your doctor to make sure that they're comfortable signing your death certificate if you do pass away. And for the doctors out there, if you're getting a call from the police department in reference to a death of one of your patients, 9 out of 10 times, there's nothing there that says that it's trauma related, that it's suspicious, unusual, because if it was, they wouldn't be wasting their time calling the primary care physician. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They would immediately say, there's a knife in the back. This is obviously something suspicious. I don't know who put it there. So we're going to go ahead and call some detectives out and do what we need to do. They're not going to waste time calling a physician to say, hey, will you sign this death certificate because so-and-so has passed away. And when that doctor says, well, okay, like how were they found? Well, with a knife in their back on their bed. Well, that's a little freaky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that would definitely come to the medical examiners. But we do have a lot of, older folks up here. Just have a conversation, simple conversation with your doctor. Talk about your medical history. Talk about the problems that you're having and how you're trying to deal with it. And if something were to happen, is that doctor willing to sign the death certificate? Is he willing to take care of you after you pass away? And 9 out of 10 times it'll get called to me and I'll say, sounds like a natural. Sounds like you've got a doctor willing to sign. I'll put it in the decline log and you've notified me and I thank you. And the family will move on with what they want with the funeral home that they want to go with. And then we never even really get involved.
In talking with you, I know I can speak for myself. I appreciate how quickly you guys respond and how you understand that there's a family member sitting there that needs to be taken care of and get back to their family. And that's just very considerate to take all that in and basically build around that. How are we going to get these people back to their family as soon as possible? How can we make this easier for this family? Because death is a really sad time for everybody.
I mean, it's very sad. And the push behind everything is Scott, myself, and Dr. Kirchner realize that at some point we're all going to be in that same boat, somehow, some way. And whatever we could do to help that family. So even if it's not our case and the family has questions, they're still free to call our office and we'll discuss it. I've discussed numerous cases with family members and they're like, well, that makes more sense. I completely understand now. Thank you for your time. And I'm like, if you have any other family members that have questions, have them give me a call. And Scott will take calls. And if it's something outside his realm, he'll refer them to me. He'll take their information. He'll call me and then I'll call them. We try to take care of our county the way it should be. I mean, we are not the hustle and bustle of, say, Maricopa County where we just don't have time. We have time. So we'll take the time, we'll spend the time, and we'll talk to the families. And like I said, I'm Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, say per business hours, but I'm always available. If you call me after hours, I will get back to you the next business day as soon as possible, and we'll discuss whatever it is that person feels that they need to discuss. I mean, we are a very open medical examiner's office where we're here for the community. And if they have questions and they have concerns, then I want to address those questions and concerns, because if it makes their life easier during the time where they lose a loved one, then we're being very proactive and we're doing our job.
And how do they get a hold of you?
They can call our office at 928-532-6050, and I'm an extension 5527, or they can email us at medical.examiner@navajocountyaz.gov.
Perfect. Well, Trent, thank you so much. This was really interesting. We could actually talk about this for hours, I think.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And I appreciate you coming on the show and getting that information out there for your program.
No problem.
And thank you for watching Safe and Sound, and we'll see you next month.
YouTube.